In the multiple choice menu video, we discussed in vague detail about the text box display. So let's go ahead and cover that now. First, open Macro Express, and you can either make a new macro or select one that you've already created. Just make sure that you're not doing this on a macro that you intend on keeping, or if you do, make sure that you don't mess your existing one up. First off, let's go over the command on how to create a text box. And I'm just going to delete all my other lines of code in this macro script by holding down Shift and selecting the first one, going to the bottom choice, and pressing the delete key on my keyboard. Next, we want to go to the dialogues command and click TextBoxDisplay. Now we need to decide what kind of interface is going to be presented to the end user. We have several different options that we can use. Our first choice is the box remains open until user clicks on the OK button. To see an example of that, if we click Set Manually, you can see the window title, the main box information, and the OK button. Now, one nice thing about using the OK for displaying a text box is it allows the end user a pause in the macro script. One disadvantage of using this method is the macro is still running and it still is using memory while this box is displayed. If you use a complex or a basic pause in Macro Express, it doesn't use as many system resources. Let's go ahead and press OK to return back to the display a text box window. Our next option is the time floating box, or end of the macro. A time floating box is used for if you want to display a dialog to the user and leave it running for a few seconds. Say if you were making a demo of a macro and you wanted them to have to wait 20 seconds before the macro would actually run. Well, a floating time box would accomplish this. And how do we specify the amount of seconds for that floating time box to stay open? Well, the floating time will say seconds down here, and you just type in, say, 25 seconds. The next choice is the floating box until close box command, or end of macro. And this is a very beneficial command. This allows you to have a window displayed to the end user for as long as you would like, or until the macro terminates. If you use a closed text box, this will terminate this floating box. And let's do an example of that right now. So first we need to select our floating box until close box command. Then we need to type in a box header. And actually you can get away with not typing in a header or even box content, but I do recommend that you put it in there as it looks more professional. And then what we can do is type in the content here. From there we can also specify a different size, say set manually, and drag this around. We can also grab the corner here and change the actual size of the box. If we click Save, you'll notice the information down here in the left top width and height all adjusted to what we just specified. The next option is always on top, which means that it will always be in our visibility and it will never be minimized or hidden behind some other application. The Keep Focus checkbox, if checked, which is the default, tells Macro Express to set focus to the macro pause dialog after it launches. If the box is left unchecked, focus will be set back to whichever window had it when the dialog was launched. In other words, focus will be set to the runtime dialog for launching and the setback to the other window afterwards. If we run our script, you'll notice that it pulls up and then closes right away. And the reason why is because the text box display is the only line located in this script. So once it shows it, even though there's no box that says TextBoxClose, it says, well, if the macro ends, then so will all the text box display dialogues. So what we need to do is add a little bit of filler into this macro script to actually see how the text box display works in this example. In this macro example, we're going to use this text box display about 4 times. So to clarify which text box display we're currently in, I'm going to open this and change the box header. And you can rename these boxes to anything that you want. It's best though, however, if you name it something that has to do with the information you're providing in the box. So what I'm going to rename this box to is floating box until close. And I of course need to select the floating box option if it deselected that, and click OK. So now when the script activates, we have one text box display that will display that information until either there is a text box close or the macro comes to an end. Let's add another text box display by going under Dialogues, Text Box Display, and this time we're going to use the box remains until user clicks the OK button. Let's go ahead and type in a header, box remains open until user clicks OK. Box 2 for the content. And we'll press OK again. Now, let's say after this text box is displayed and the user clicks OK, this first text box, which is our floating box, will disappear. Now, the easiest way to use a text box close is by copying the text box display that you want to close. So to clarify this, I want to close the floating box until close text box display. So I'm going to copy this by pressing Control-C. I'm then going to click on my next line and paste it so that it goes in afterwards. Now right now I have 3 text box displays available. Well, the last option, I don't want to have a text box display, I want to have a text box close. So I'm going to double click on this text box display. Then I'm going to select the close text box and press OK. Now the reason I didn't just select text box close over here is because you need to specify to Macro Express which text box you want to close. It doesn't know whether you want to close the floating box until close text box display or if you want to close this text box display. So the reason why it asks for the box header is because that needs to match which text box display you would like to close. And press OK. Now just so that we can really see this in action, we're going to add one more text box display. I'm going to double click here on the text box display and have the box remain open until the OK button is selected. I'll name the top box remains open until user clicks OK. And the box content will be named box 2. Press OK. Now I'm going to run this through step by step so that you can actually see what's going on. If I click debug and I click step through macro, it will now allow us to see where it is in execution at in the macro script. Next I need to press play to continue. Now you'll notice that I have the floating content box here. And then it goes to my next text box display. I'm going to press OK or play again. Now it gives me my OK text box, which is located here. When I press OK, it's going to go to the text box close. Let's continue the execution of this command. And finally, we get our last line, the text box display showing this box with the OK button. Now when I press OK, it's going to terminate this script from running because it reached the end of the script. And then you won't see the little running guy down here anymore. As you may recall in our first text box display, let's go ahead and double click on it to open it. The floating box until close box command or end of macro. If I actually delete or disable these next 3 options by clicking on the first one and holding down shift and clicking on the last, and then clicking this option to toggle the disable. This now allows me to only run this one line of this macro file. So if I press OK, it's going to display the content box really quick and just disappear. And the reason why it does that is because this text box display will only stay open until the end of the script or until it gets to the text box close. So the reason why it goes so quickly through the macro is because this is the only line of code and it actually doesn't require any user intervention to run. So it quickly displays it and then terminates the macro, closing this box with it. And this concludes the text box display tutorial. If you need more information on these, please review the book.